Major spoiler warning. I am going to be talking about the end of Fallout 4 and certain things that happened that will spoil the game if you haven't played through it yet. So, after starting Fallout 4, last year? I finally actually finished Fallout 4. And when I'm talking about Fallout 4, I'm talking about the standard version, no DLC or anything like that. God, the amount of time I've put into Fallout 4 is, I guess, around about 160-ish hours, which is one of the longest times I've ever spent on a modern game. In fact, it probably is the most I've ever spent on a sort of modern video game. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. It's been a lot of ups and downs throughout the story, and there's been some, well, at least for me, there's been at least one huge twist which I never saw coming. And in the end, it was a decent game. I got a hell of a lot of time out of it, so I certainly got the value out of it. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the story itself. So the basic story is, just like previous Fallouts, a nuclear bomb is about to go off, and you are gonna go hide in a vault, and then once it's over, you get out, basically. But the big thing that happens right at the beginning is your child, Sean, is kidnapped. And also your husband or wife, depending on which gender you pick, is killed. So almost immediately, you're on a revenge mission, or a rescue mission, so we say, to get back your son Sean. And as things develop, you start to form sort of little allegiances with different factions, like the Minutemen, who were like one of the early on ones, and others like that as well, Brotherhood of Steel, Railroad, all sorts. And yeah, it's such a time-consuming game. I actually remember about a week ago, I was talking to a friend over the party chat on PlayStation 4, and I ended up putting on Fallout 4, and we were talking, and I was playing, and I must have played for 6 hours straight. I can't remember the last time I've had the time or the energy to actually be able to just sit down and play a video game for that long, but it was great. I loved it. I got really engrossed in the game and felt really sort of immersed in the world and everything like that, and got a fair bit of progress done in that time as well, which was great. And yeah, it's like a lot of games from Bethesda. It's extremely time consuming, which is, I think, why at one point I ended up taking a break. At one point I'd been playing and I'd put about 50 hours in, and I was getting a little bit sort of tired of the grind, because you do have to grind a lot with it being not a strong RPG, but more an action RPG. There is that element of having to level up and just get to a point where your character's able to compete with some of the more difficult enemies in the game. And yeah, I think that's what made me stop for a while, but I'm glad I went back. I'm glad I finished it, because, as I say, the ending completely shocked me. All this talk leading up to the Institute, every faction tells you how bad they are, and everything like that, but yet, when it came to the actual point of finally getting into the Institute and seeing it, it kind of looked like a really sort of posh sort of science lab, essentially. Everything looked very, in a way though, I was suspicious, because it looked very sort of cold and clean, and everything looked pristine, whereas obviously everything out in the Commonwealth was basically destroyed because of the nuclear war. And it's one of those things where eventually you get to meet the person they keep calling Father, and then it hits you with a massive bombshell that Father is actually Sean. And for quite a while I didn't accept it, because it to me it didn't make a lot of sense at first, because right when you come out of the vault, you head back to your little sort of house in Sanctuary Hills, and you meet up with Codsworth, who was like the little sort of robot companion thing that you had before the nuclear bomb hit. And he says at one point that you've been in there for like over 200 years, and when then later on you think, well, there's little things that seem to contradict the time frame. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So for quite a while I couldn't accept it, and in the end I eventually just was like, do you know what, let's just go with it and see where this goes. So in the end, after all this sort of build up of being told the Institute is evil and everything like that, I essentially ended up helping the Institute, because in a weird way I tried to put myself, maybe I'm taking this a little bit too seriously, but I tried to take it into my mindset of, if I had a son and he went missing and then I found him, regardless of what he looked like, whatever the time frame and all this other stuff, I would want to do whatever I could to help him. And I think that's what my mindset went into, even though at first I was extremely skeptical, should I say, of helping the Institute. In the end, I was like, well, I want to help my son. And then when you find out that not only is this your son who looks like a 60, 70-year-old man, he's dying, he's got cancer or something like that. And yeah, so even more you feel sort of guilty, because you have several opportunities to literally just walk away from the Institute, and you essentially become their sort of number one target then to take down, because you're an enemy of them. You do get multiple choices, but for whatever reason I stuck with the Institute, and I ended up taking out the Brotherhood, I ended up taking out the Railroad, and all these groups that had previously helped me, and I felt a little bit bad for it, but then at the same time I was like, but I'm also helping my son Sean, who, because of weird time frames, he's actually an old man, whereas I'm much younger looking than him, even though I'm his father. Very confusing, but yeah, it's been good. It genuinely has been good. I haven't been able to get into a game, an RPG of any sort, really, for a long time, so I think it seems to me that this style of RPG, a more looser RPG, shall we say, than something more stricter like a Skyrim or a Final Fantasy or something like that. Something that still gives you the option to sort of run and gun and things like that. I think that's kind of the RPG I was looking for. So in my opinion, I really enjoyed Fallout 4 for what it was, and I got a hell of a lot of time out of it, as I've said. The ending genuinely surprised me, because I wasn't expecting to side with the Institute, or the fact that my son would appear to be an old man, and yeah, all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. Tell me what you think, if you've played through it as well. I'm sure a lot of people have played through it by now. Just give me your opinion, I'd really like to know. Don't worry about spoiling other endings, because I have no intention of going back and playing it again, because, like I say, like 160, 170 hours, that's enough for me. So anyway, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.